the very last enlightened disciple of the Buddha, before he attained parinibbana, Venerable Subhadda, the wandering ascetic, came to ask the Buddha some questions. Almost didn't get his chance, but the Buddha was kind enough on his deathbed to teach him. He was asking questions about whether it's possible for ascetics in other religions or systems of training to become enlightened. And the Buddha emphasized that only by following the Eightfold Noble Path, the Atangika Magga that we chanted this morning, is it possible for human beings to free themselves from suffering, attain Nibbana. And he went on to teach Subhadda how to practice the Eightfold Path, how to meditate, how to contemplate. And they say he gave him the reflection to see the mind like the moon, when it's covered over by craving and attachment, mental proliferation. It's like the moon in the sky that's covered by the dark clouds. Its radiance is subdued or even disappears. But when we cultivate the Eightfold Path, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, this gives us the clarity, the mindfulness, the wisdom to push away the clouds, clear away the clouds, and the brightness of the moon comes to the forefront, just like the mind that's let go of craving and attachment. So we're practicing this Eightfold Noble Path, following in the Buddha's footsteps. And in particular, we're on a retreat, so we're putting lots of effort into developing Samma Sati, right mindfulness. Sitting, developing mindfulness, walking, developing mindfulness. Because it's very much the key quality that supports all the other factors of the path to arise. As we practice, often doubts arise, because even within this Eightfold Noble Path there's a certain room for variation. So we have doubts arise. Should I be practicing mindfulness of breathing, or recollection of the Buddha, or another meditation object? Should I be contemplating, practicing vipassana? When should I contemplate? When should I practice samatha? And these kind of very understandable doubts are always arising in our mind. And you might say, in one sense, there's no real answer, because everybody is a little bit different, and our minds can be different at different times. One monk came to Ajahn, and he'd been practicing what we call the Burmese method of vipassana meditation. You might say direct or straight vipassana, contemplating all the time, not really emphasizing the practice of samatha or calming the mind, but just contemplating the three characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta, all the time. He asked Ajahn, can I carry on practicing like that with you under your guidance? And Ajahn said, yes, if that's what you're used to and it's been giving you good results, we'll carry on. He said when you have a fruit basket, like down in the kitchen there's a bowl or a basket with fruit, with different kinds of fruit in, and they all have their value. They can all nourish you and sustain you. Meditation is like that. We're working with our one mind. There's obviously only one mind, one person. But we use different techniques and practices to help cultivate that mind and cultivate the path factors. And sometimes it's appropriate to do more samatha meditation, because we need to really calm the mind and bring up steadiness through commitment to the practice of mindfulness, sustaining the mindfulness until samadhi arises and the mind goes beyond the hindrances, pancha nivarana, becomes very bright, clear. And then someone else, if you tell them to go away and just practice samatha, watch your breath, sitting, walking, standing, lying down, or just recite the word Buddho, they just become full of doubts. And they walk and they sit trying to bring up this word Buddho or follow the breath, and they doubt, is this really going to make my mind peaceful? Will I really understand anything? And it's true, some people, you might say, are more inclined to contemplation, developing the wisdom faculty. And sometimes, everybody might find there may be times when the contemplation of Dhamma is the most valuable way to meditate. It can lead the mind to calm down, it can lead us to go beyond the different hindrances and obstacles that are bothering us. Sometimes that's stimulated from external sources. We listen to some Dhamma, contemplate it, and already the mind brightens and calms. Other times we just are reflecting on our own experience, contemplating, watching the impermanence of this body, impermanence of our thoughts, and that can work. Other times we do need to just really concentrate the mind, focus on our main meditation object, the breath, or Buddho, or contemplate death, Marananusati, and so on. And there's many different objects we use. And you put all your heart, all your effort into doing that, just to really train the mind to let go of everything and become very firm, focus on the breath, on Buddho. So part of our skill as a practitioner is to know what will help us, to know our character and know what works, and to be willing to, we have to experiment sometimes, but then to review our practice and see what is working, what is bringing us results. When they like to ask Ajahn Chah, when should we contemplate, when should we practice vipassana? He might answer, well, if you're peaceful enough, then contemplate. Which makes sense, but the doubters often carry on, well, how peaceful is peaceful? What level of samadhi do we need? Well, you really have to answer that question yourself through the practice. The idea is contemplation is clearly seeing the nature of this body and this mind. You don't actually have to know a lot, go anywhere, do anything special. Just applying mindfulness and wisdom back to your own body and own mind as it is, learning from the way it is in the present moment. And if you can do that without becoming distracted or caught up in your moods or the different mental hindrances, well, just do it. And sometimes you can sit down and just do it straight away, and it works. Or sometimes we have a particular hindrance coming up, and only through contemplation can we teach ourselves to let go of it. Maybe there's a particular problem bothering our mind. We have to keep reminding ourselves of the Dhamma. So you keep reminding ourselves these thoughts are impermanent. These thoughts are not self. Looking at them from a different angle, looking at the experience from a different angle, until through patient, determined effort and contemplating we let go. And then there'll be other times where we just stick with our meditation object and don't give in to anything. And don't let the mind stray from the meditation object. And gradually the mind becomes brighter, more powerful. So there's not always one fixed answer to this question. We have to practice and try different things sometimes. As we know, according to the books, there's 5 main hindrances that will come up all the time as we're going about our life, not just when we're meditating, but any time. These 5 hindrances are affecting us. They call them the 5 robbers or thieves, because they rob us of our wholesome states of mind, the skillful states of mind. They rob us of samadhi, and they rob us of mindfulness, and they rob us of any of the good qualities, kindness, compassion, wisdom, and so on. They take them away. So they're called the 5 robbers, and they're very skillful, tricky to deal with. Like 5 people surrounding us keep attacking us. One comes in and attacks us, and we just deal with it, and then the next one comes in. It's very tiring, frustrating. But we really have no choice but to keep practicing and learning the skill of how to deal with them. And as someone was asking yesterday, they're all compared with different states of suffering that human beings can get caught into or stuck into. So they say sense desire, the first hindrance, where your mind becomes obsessed with, addicted to different sense objects, always thinking about them, wanting them, fascinated with them, delighted in them, never able to let go. They say that's like being in debt, when you have a really big debt hanging over your head. So if you have a mortgage for 25 years, you take on, you've got no choice but just to keep earning money, pay off that debt. As long as you have that debt, you never feel free. You never feel completely at peace in yourself. It's always at the back of your mind. It's like that. You can't just sit quietly and contentedly. You keep thinking of your sense object. And when you become obsessed with a person that you're really infatuated with, the way they look, the way they talk, the way they are, or fascinated with food or some material thing, you want to get your new computer or your new mobile phone or something that just keeps coming up in your mind. You're constantly in debt to that thing as long as you can't free yourself from those thoughts. It's tiring, and still we go on addicted to that thing. The second one, payabhata, or ill will, it says like when you're ill, you've got a fever. None of us like being ill when you have to just be with that illness and the symptoms. You feel hot, aches and pains, or different pain around your body, uncomfortable, tired, no energy. You're stuck with that illness, and maybe some illnesses knock you out for days on end. Worst of all, when you don't even know what it is. I remember when I was a young monk in Thailand at Wat Nana Chat. The monastery is in a swamp. Originally it was a swamp, although it's jungle. And in the rainy season you get very bad weather, everything becomes damp, mouldy, and the monks were always getting fevers. Not just, very occasionally monks had malaria or scrub typhus, but sometimes they'd get a fever, they just didn't know what it was. No name for it, and the doctor, even if you saw a doctor, they wouldn't have a name for it. They just say, fever. You say, I know I've got fever, but they can't give you a name, and sometimes didn't really have any medication either. Sometimes the fever is so bad you just lie on your back 7 days straight, got no energy to eat, no energy to go and wash or do anything, till gradually it lifts and you're stuck with that. All you want to do is get free from it, get better. And when we're ill, it's like that. We feel totally pressured and stuck with this illness and just want to get rid of it, get away from it, but you can't. Anger is like that. Pressures the mind, takes over the mind. Very unpleasant to be with as an experience. The other hindrance, tinamida, means like sloth, torpor, dullness, laziness, drowsiness. They say it's like in a prison, being in prison. If somebody threw you in prison for whatever reason, and you're just stuck in a dark cell, all you think about is, when am I going to get out? How long do I have to stay in this prison? You're completely surrounded by kind of dark energy. Your mind can't function because it's drowsy or dull. And even if a little part of your mind wants to free itself from it, you just feel so totally trapped at that time, at that moment. It's a real struggle to try and get out of that. Then there's restlessness and agitation of mind. Utacha kukucha. They say it's like being enslaved. Someone has captured you in a war, or somehow or other they bought you as a slave, and they just can order you around exactly as they want and do exactly what they want with you. Tell you to go here, go there. You've got no freedom, no choice, no say in the matter. They just push you around all the time, bully you, nag you, a slave, and absolutely no rights, no entitlements. The restlessness of the mind is like that. It just pulls us around and we feel totally trapped to it. Can't escape. Sometimes it seems endless as well. It goes on for long, long periods, just restless, thinking and thinking and thinking. Very tiring, but still we're stuck in it. Can't even sleep at night, can't concentrate, can't do anything, can't enjoy anything. The last one is doubt, uncertainty. And they say it's like being stuck in the desert or in the bush. Someone got lost in the bush just last night in the dark. Took half an hour wandering around till they found their place. Even in a familiar place, when it goes dark, you can get lost. Or you go off the path, you can get lost. Let alone in an unfamiliar place, bush or desert. And when you're stuck in the desert or the bush somewhere and you don't know where the path is, you don't know how to get home, how to get back, you feel miserable. And the longer it goes on, the worse you feel. The Buddha said this is like doubt. It just takes you around in circles, going nowhere, getting nowhere. And it kind of wears you down, stops you putting attention on your meditation object, stops you doing good. You could be doubting about keeping the precepts, doing dana, meditating, anything. Leads your mind on a merry dance, around in circles, going nowhere. Very frustrating. So all these hindrances gave these pictures of when we're trapped or stuck in some unpleasant, difficult situation. And yet they're coming up all the time. And we're actually so used to them, often we don't realize they're there. Or we just give in. So accept, this is a hindrance again. We're so used to them, we just kind of take it as normal. It's only when we put forth effort into meditation, sitting, walking, bringing up mindfulness and contemplating, that we can deal with the hindrances. Obviously there's many different approaches. Sometimes we just use our determination. The Buddha said you just bite your teeth together, make your mind very firm and say, I'm not going to give in. So maybe you're sitting meditation, maybe you're sleepy. You would like to just go off and sleep. but you stick with it. And you see many times meditators, they're sleepy, but they sit there, sit, keep putting effort, and eventually they come out of the darkness of that mind state. And like that moon on a moonlit night, it comes out from the clouds, the mind comes out from the darkness of the dullness state, the drowsiness, and they wake up again. Very refreshing. Like getting out of prison, you feel like your whole life has started again. That's what you're aiming for. You get the freedom from your dull state. It's something good, it's something desirable. Or you've been watching a restless state of mind, you just keep thinking over and over again about the same old issue, something that's come up in the past you haven't resolved. Or maybe some anxiety about the future, something that may or may not happen. And you've just been thinking and thinking and thinking, but you've kept watching, using mindfulness, using patience. You just keep watching and watching. Eventually you notice how it fades. It runs out of steam. It's gone. And if you're mindful at that moment, again, it's a moment of liberation. And you say, oh, even this terrible worry I've been experiencing, it's finished, it's gone. If you make your mind really mindful and conscious of that at that moment, you learn a lot. You learn to see the impermanence of your own restless mind state. And that gives you some insight for the future as well. You know every restless mind state is just another state of mind. It's just thinking. You could call this, what we call jittanupassana, satipatthana, the practicing mindfulness directed to the mind itself. And when you're seeing hindrances there, you know they're there, even though you can't yet abandon them. You keep watching, and then you notice when they've gone. Well, you're seeing the mind that had the hindrance, the desire, the aversion, the dullness, whatever, and then you're seeing it's gone. There's a very important insight for meditators, because it gives you the confidence that you know every hindrance is impermanent. What's impermanent is not self. It's not anything lasting or permanent. It's not something you could call yourself. It's not you, yourself. You don't really own it. We call them conditions of mind. They come up prompted by different triggers and causes. They last for a while and then they go. And there's this other awareness, the awareness of the path, of mindfulness and wise reflection that might notice that. You notice, oh, now the hindrance is gone. I'm not experiencing any greed at the moment, no aversion at the moment, no dullness at the moment. It's very important for you to become aware at that time. So you know the mind that is free from greed, anger, delusion, doubt, worry. If you become more and more familiar with that, then the mind naturally inclines to those mental states because they're better than what you had before, they're better than the hindrances. So you make them really conscious and your mind will naturally incline in that direction. You will want it more, want to experience the freedom of the mind without hindrances more. And it gets used to the mind that is free of hindrances. So you'll notice, there might be times in your day when you don't even realize your mind is free of the hindrances. But as you're practicing mindfulness and meditation, you do become more aware of that. You might notice certain activities help you to free the mind from hindrances, not just meditation, sitting and walking. Maybe when you become absorbed in some activity that you really like or are good at or skilled at, it can become a vehicle for letting go of the hindrances. Some people become very calm when they're doing a job of work. It could be anything. It could be writing or building or driving a car, anything. They put their mind on that activity and all the other hindrances disappear, and they're just focusing on that activity, mindful, aware, and feel quite calm. Time goes quickly, they feel at ease. So even more mundane activities, ordinary activities, can become a form of meditation. Even something very, very ordinary daily activity like, say, cooking food, you can use that as a way to train your mind to free it from hindrances. As you're cooking, you have to consider many things. You have to consider the ingredients of the food that you're preparing. However simple, you need ingredients. You're thinking, how many people am I cooking for? How much do I have to prepare, the amounts? What do I have to do to put these ingredients together? Do I have to fry or bake or whatever? There's a whole range of activities you can focus your mind on, and it becomes a form of meditation. Rather than letting your mind drift off as you're doing that activity, if it's a habitual activity, it's easy for the mind to drift off to other things. Your body is doing the cooking, but your mind is caught into worries or remembering something you didn't like, getting angry, or fantasizing about something. You can do that, but now you're making even a simple task like cooking a kind of meditation. And you don't let your mind slip away from the task that you're doing. You can even contemplate, practice vipassana as you do it. You watch your mind, the different sense contact that's arising and passing, the smells, the visual images. If you taste the food to see what it's like, just taste arising, passing away. You can observe different feelings, sensations, thoughts arising, pass away. You observe your body in that situation, your posture, the movements of your hands, your legs, where you're standing, walking, turning. There's a whole array of things going on there, physical and mental, that you can observe with mindfulness and contemplate, and these are impermanent, arising and ceasing. So sometimes we have to make use of what we are doing in our life. We can't always sit down and meditate like this. We can when we're in the monastery, but other times we have to be very busy. But you can turn these other activities into a form of meditation and use them as a way to free the mind from these hindrances. The more continuous the mindfulness, the awareness we have, then there's less space in the mind for the hindrances to take over. They might arise, but we see them and we quickly let them go. Return to our activity with mindfulness, or return to the breath, or we return to our contemplation. Our aim is always to free the mind from the hindrances, because they're unwholesome mental states. They're a form of suffering, a form of unhappiness, you might say. There's many different avenues and techniques we can use to overcome the hindrances. As we're sitting meditation, walking meditation, you'll find there's those periods where the mindfulness becomes very strong, very continuous. And the mind seems to settle down in one place. If we're doing the breathing meditation just with the feeling of the breath, you're contemplating the breath going in, going out, you're aware how coarse or refined the breath is, how short or long it is. And as mindfulness becomes continuous, then the factors of samadhi arise. Samadhi is firmness of mind, calmness of mind. So they have piti and sukha. And piti is like rapture, where the mind is very enthusiastic, for the activity that one is doing, the sitting meditation, the walking. It's not bored, it's interested. We actually feel a certain joy, enthusiasm for what we're doing. This helps us to overcome feelings of tiredness, dullness, irritation, frustration. So when the meditation starts to become enjoyable, we've been putting effort into bringing up mindfulness, and now the mindfulness is sustained. So we feel we're enjoying the meditation and we want to proceed, carry on. It leads onwards. As the piti arises, well, there's different forms of piti. Some of you have already experienced. Sometimes we feel very light in body and mind. All the pains and aches disappear. Sometimes we have tears, goosebumps, hair stand on end. Sometimes all the sensation of the body just disappears and it feels like we're floating in midair. Sometimes it feels like our mind is expanding through our body, so it seems to be very big, filling the whole room. At this point, as we meditate, often we also get the experience of light, radiant light in our mind, in the inner mind. It seems very bright, like someone's turned on a light switch. And that also helps to push away dullness, sleepiness. Because of the presence of mindfulness, over and over again, mindfulness turned to its object, the mind becomes very calm, energized, bright. Even if you want to sleep, when the piti is strong, you can't sleep. Even if you lie down, your mind is still in samadhi. And this is a cause for sukha to arise. Sukha is like great contentment, happiness. It's a very calming quality. So it calms all the restlessness and the agitation of mind down. So the mind becomes very content in itself. It's not looking out of itself for anything else. We don't need any other distractions or anything else to do. We're happy contemplating our meditation object or contemplating the Dhamma. Piti and sukha arise. And finally we experience ekaggata, so one-pointedness of the mind, where the mind is just in one place, not going anywhere. It's firm, it's calm, it's relaxed, it's happy, it's content. And they talk about how it's like merges with the object. So if you're following the breath, maybe the sense of the mind and the breath just become one, and you can't really feel the breath anymore. You're just with the mind itself, just knowing the mind itself, although it's knowing the breath, but the movement of the breath, the coarseness of the breath has disappeared. And the mind is very content inside, very happy, not wanting anything else, not interested in listening to sounds, bringing up images or fantasies or anything like that. If it becomes very still, very quiet, then there's no thoughts at all. It's just knowing from moment to moment, knowing. And that sense of timelessness comes. So you could be sitting there and it seems like only a few minutes have passed and maybe you sat there for an hour. Or been walking meditation. Some people, it happens when they're walking meditation, they become very absorbed, peaceful, and they just carry on walking and they don't realize how time has passed, what else is going on around them, they're not noticing. If you're walking meditation, maybe you get so peaceful then you just stop. Even the movement of the legs becomes disturbing, so you just stop, stand still and let the mind go into itself. These are the experiences of samadhi, and obviously there's different levels of samadhi, as we chanted this morning. We call it momentary concentration, when the mind gathers together briefly. There's what we call neighborhood or access concentration, where the mind gathers together for quite a while, and the hindrances have disappeared, and it's just very peaceful, but you can still direct the mind to think if you need to, or hear a sound if you need to. You can even move if you need to. Or the mind sometimes goes very deep, what we call appana samadhi. It's completely fixed on its object, and one doesn't move and one doesn't know anything else at that time. Not asleep, not hypnotized, just knowing the object, but completely absorbed internally. Then there's always the experience of that state of samadhi fading, and as if the mind coming back out of it. Whether it's been for a few moments, or many minutes, or even a few hours sometimes. And our teachers encourage us at that point to contemplate. Contemplate our own body and mind, meaning investigate, look at the true nature of your body and mind. Because when we have developed some samadhi, the mind is at its clearest, and it can look at this body and mind with an unbiased view. So we're just witnessing the truth, the way things are. It's right for understanding the Four Noble Truths, to see suffering and its origin, to bring up mindfulness and see, oh, I suffer through the attachment to the five khandhas, the identification with them as self, body, feelings, memories, thoughts, sense consciousness. The Buddha has already described us, our human body and mind for us. He said, look at these different aspects, what we call rupa dhamma, nama dhamma, and notice their nature, they're changing. When the mind develops this state of calm, it's much easier to see change. And in a very sustained way, if your mind is firm, calm, still, you'll notice change very quickly. So if you come to look at the body, you start to notice the change of this body, the changing nature of the body. To help this, the Buddha said, well, contemplate the 32 parts as we chanted this morning. You take each of these parts out, visualize them like a car mechanic taking apart an engine. You take apart your body and put them on a table or on the floor in front of you. Hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, bones, flesh, heart, liver, kidneys, and so on. When you're peaceful, you can do this. You just analyze your own body. What is it? What's it made up of? Different body parts, the four elements. And you're asking yourself questions. Where is the self? Where's the person in this? We call it me, mine, myself, but where is the self in these different body parts? You're starting to become familiar with the view of, well, the body is actually not a self. It's made up of four elements. These elements are not self. They're empty of self. Literally, if you take apart the 32 parts, place them in the ground in front of you, well, there's nothing left, is it? The sense of a human being, a person, is gone. You're doing that in your mind. That's just one way of contemplating. Another way, look back into your body with the peaceful mind. Travel around it. Stay within it. And ask these questions. Because the mind is clear and calm, you can do this. And that sense of self-identification starts to fade. So many people have this sense of separation where the mind is as if a separate thing looking back at the body. The mind is one thing, body is another. The body becomes a bit more like a puppet or a robot. So if that sense of insight arises, and you're contemplating, seeing the lack of self in this body, maybe you get up from your sitting meditation and you walk away, but you mindfully keep contemplating. You might see, this body is like, it's walking down the path, but I don't really feel like I own this body. I'm just watching it, observing it. There's a part of you separate from it. And the brighter the mind and the sharper the mindfulness, and the clearer that distinction between the mind that knows and the body itself, the clearer that is. There's a sense of separation. It's almost like another person going about their business, walking, sitting, eating, washing, standing, lying down. There's a sense of calm and peace. The hindrances have gone, suffering is gone, the mind is just contemplating. Even if unpleasant feelings arise, the mind is not grasping them as self or identifying with them as self, but just saying, an unpleasant feeling. You know it, but then you let go straight away. Pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, what we call seeing feeling in feeling. Seeing the body in the body, the feeling in the feeling, and the mind in the mind. And now we know the mind that is peaceful when it's beyond the hindrances. But even that we watch, and you'll see the samadhi will fade. Maybe after a while it fades back and you're back in the normal state of mind with more of the hindrances bothering you. So even the 8 factors of the path are impermanent until the mind has attained realization. All these factors of the path we're developing are still impermanent. They arise, they pass away. Body is impermanent, mind is impermanent. Suffering is impermanent, magga is impermanent. The only permanent thing is nibbana, where the mind has fully understood these truths, fully penetrated them. And that understanding doesn't leave. So there's many ways we learn to calm the mind and then contemplate. And you can experiment for yourself, see what works for you. So we have a little bit of time left for the end of this period, so maybe you can sit quietly and you learn for yourself through your own practice what works for you.